Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's DAF Hayami KIDDUSHIN Nuntes. Let's go back to the beginning of the parak, the beginning of the Mishnah, and learn it again, which will lead us into the new sugya. So the Mishnah has three parts. Number one, a fellow turns to his friend, say v'kadesh li isha planis. Please, be mekadesh a certain isha for me. And this fellow goes ahead. So Reuven asked Shimon, be mekadesh me an isha. Shimon goes ahead and is mekadesh that same isha for himself. Mekudeshes l'sheni. Okay, it's a done deal. She is now Shimon's wife. Although it's inappropriate, the Gemara will call him a Ramai, a dishonest fellow, not a man of integrity, but nevertheless, what is done is done. Next case. Reuven approaches Rachel, you're my wife after 30 days. So I'm giving you a ring now, which will take effect. The Kiddushin will be applied in 30 days. And a second fellow comes right in, moves in right in the middle, and is Mekadesh the Isha Ba'acher B'Kitcha within 30 days. Once again, second fellow gets her. Mikudeshes L'Sheni, Bas Yisrael L'Koyin, Teichal B'Truma. So if this Isha was from a Yisrael family and is now engaged to this second fellow, right, the fellow who came right in there and it was Mekadesh within 30 days, he's a Kohen, she can share his Truma like an ordinary wife. Case 3 of the Mishnah. Reuven approaches Rachel with a ring. You're Mekudesh to me, May Achshav, starting now, and it will culminate after 30 days. Now the Gemara will speak and explain exactly how to interpret these words, but that's what he says. So basically, in simple form, we're not sure what he meant. Did he mean to make it conditional, or did he mean that the Kiddushin starts now and sort of concludes in 30 days? And what happened? Once again, a second fellow drives right in there, and a second fellow comes as Mekadesher within this 30-day period. We're not sure whose wife she is. We're not sure whose Kiddushin takes precedence. Mekudeshes, Venim Kadeshes, she's married but not married. We're not sure whom she's married to, and therefore she's in limbo. For instance, regarding Teruma, Bas Yisrael L'Koyin, Oy Bas Koyin L'Yisrael, if she comes from a Yisrael family, she's now supposedly engaged to one of these fellows who happens to be a Kohen, or the opposite, Bas Koyin L'Yisrael, she comes from a Kohen family, and these fellows are Yisrael. L'Teichel B'Truma, she cannot have Truma because basically she's in limbo. We're not sure whether or not she's married. So we have three cases. Case number one, Reuven asks Shimon, please go be Mekadesh an Isha on my behalf. Shimon goes and is Mekadesh Isha for himself. He's the husband. Second case, Reuven approaches Rachel. You're Mekadesh to me after 30 days. So here is the money, but it's only going to take effect after 30. Shimon comes in as Mekadesher immediately. That Kiddushin takes effect. Case number 3. Here's the ring. You're Mekadesh to me. May Achshav Ula Achar Shleishim Yayim. In this case, we have a suffix. Says the Gemara, we began with Ha'omer L'Chaveroi Tzei V'Kadesh. He instructs his friend to be Mekadesh and Isha for him, and that fellow did it for himself. Tana, we learn in a Brisa, while Masha Asa Asi, what Shimon did holds. It takes effect, but it's not recommended. Ela Shenag Boy Minagramois. Shimon conducted himself with his good friend Reuven as a Ramai, with dishonesty, because he's turned his back on him and he betrayed him. So that's in the Bryce. But actually, we see the same point in our Mishnah as well, highlighted by the fact that the Mishnah adds a word which seems unnecessary. The Tana did done in our Tana, in our Mishnah, halach. Why does it say halach? Halach v'kitcha la'atzmai. What's the point of v'halach? Why do we need to know that he went? And it's an extra word. Halach nami diktoni. The reason why the Mishnah mentions halach to highlight this fellow's lack of integrity. Halach beramos. He chose to go down the path of betrayal and dishonesty. Okay, now we have a dik in the words of the Mishnah. We begin with ha'omer lechaveroi. He approached his good friend, please be mekadesh an isha on my behalf. It doesn't say he was a shliach, which basically means an appointed fellow who was entrusted with this mission, with this job. Go do this job for me. No, he just happened to encounter his friend on the road. Please, you're going there, be mekadesh isha for me if you happen to find her. So that's the lashon in our Mishnah. A non-shaliach, non-appointed representative. So why is it that in our Mishnah we chose lechaveri, a non-shaliach, but in the other Mishnah we had, back on DAF, nun amar aleph. Over there, the Mishnah is speaking where Reuben asked somebody. He entrusted him with a mission. Go, be mekadesh, go make a special trip, be mekadesh Rachel for me. In one location, in a specific city, in, say, New York. And Shimon chose to be mekadesh her in Chicago, in a different place. Mishnah says, well, it doesn't work. I had a reason why I preferred one location over the other. That's where I have my good friends who will advocate on my behalf and promote this shidduch. So whatever the reason is, you didn't follow instructions, you were a shliach who did not follow instructions, it doesn't work. So the question is, why did the Mishnah pick the lashon, ha'omer l'shlucha, instead of just ha'omer l'chaveroi? He happened to chance by his friend who was going in that direction. Just like in our Mishnah, where it's ha'omer l'chaveroi and not ha'omer l'shlucha. So why is it over here ha'omer l'chaveroi, over there ha'omer l'shlucha? Answer: each Mishnah is highlighting a specific aspect which pertains to that respective halacha and brings out the halacha even more. Over here, by mentioning a non-shliach, it brings out a chiddush, and likewise in that case, in the other Mishnah, by mentioning shliach specifically, it highlights an important aspect of that halacha. The chiddush in our Mishnah with a non-shliach is the itan shalucha. If the Mishnah had mentioned that in fact Reuven entrusted Shimon with this mission, he sent him to mekadesh the isha, and he was going on his behalf. Havamina would say, well, in this case, when he betrayed his sender, turned his back on him, and he did the KIDDUSHIN for himself, Shlucha Yehuda Ramai. The reason why he's a Ramai, the reason why he's considered a dishonest fellow, is because he was entrusted with the mission. The fellow placed his trust in him. The Samcha Date, Savar Avad L'Shlichusi, he was totally relying on him. He was going specially for him. Of course he'll carry out my mission. What's he doing? Turning his back on me. That's a Ramai. But suppose he's just a random fellow. He wasn't really entrusted with this mission. Just a friend who we happened to meet on the road, who happened to go in that direction. He wasn't really, placing his trust on him. So in that case, perhaps when this fellow turns around and takes the isha for himself, he's not considered a Ramai. It's not considered a betrayal of trust. Comes the Mishnah and says, no, even in this case, it's very inappropriate. It's called a Ramai. So that's the point in our Mishnah. And likewise, Hasam Rabusa Kamashmalon, likewise in the Mishnah over there with the change of location, there's a chiddush in the fact that the Mishnah mentions a shliach specifically. If the Mishnah only speaks about it, just a plain friend doing his mission, I would say it's only in that case that if he changed locations, if he switched cities on him, he was mekadesh in the other place instead of this place, it doesn't work because, the potential husband, the sender, never fathomed that this fellow is going to go, seek the isha in the other town. He was going to New York. He didn't expect him to go to Chicago. The Savar Tarach, he didn't think he would make that extra effort for him, so it was not included in his mandate, in his shlichus, and it's not a kiddush. Aval shlucha de Tarach. But when he specifically hired him for the job, he made him a shliach. Go do this for me in this town. So perhaps even if he changed locations, it's not critical because it was just sort of a reference. You'll find her in New York, but of course, if you amatriach yourself and actually go the extra mile, so to speak, to Chicago, of course I'm okay with it. Comes the Mishnah and says, no, Kamash Malon. I asked New York specifically, and not Chicago. So bottom line, our Mishnah mentions ha'omer l'chaver to bring out a certain point of Ramois, which applies even to a chaver. And the change of location in the other Mishnah is highlighted by the point that it's even a shliach. And it still doesn't work. Okay, on the topic of integrity and honesty, we have a couple of stories. Ravin Chasida, that was his name. Ozel l'kedusha le'itasa, he went to be mekadosh isha lebrei on behalf of his son. Now, Tosfos points out that the son didn't make him a shliach. It's not common, it's not respectful. We had this back on Daf Mem Hey. A son doesn't appoint the father as a shliach. So what happened? The son expressed interest in this isha, and the father sort of went and offered his services to go be mekadosh the isha for his son. And what happened? Kitchel nafshay. Ultimately, the father was mekadosh the isha for himself instead of for the son. Vatanya, but we have in our Mishnah, and expressed by the Brisa as well, right? Vatanya masha asa asoi. Sure, it works. Elashanog by minhag ramois. It's an act of ramois. Why did Rabban Chasida, this great man, conduct himself in this manner? The answer is lo yavu ani alei. Of course, he tried. He attempted to have it for his son, but they didn't want to hand her over for the son. They weren't interested in the son. So therefore, he chose to take her for himself. Well, still, he should have come clean. He should have explained to his son ahead of time what's happening. He should have informed him. He figured savar. He figured the hachi v'hachi. There's no time to waste. As this is going to happen, another fellow would approach her and be mekadosh her. So therefore, he seized the opportunity and he was mekadosh her for himself. Another story regarding Rabba bar Chana. He handed over some money to Rav Amar with the following request: Zavna niali, please purchase for me lahai ara, this specific property. So Rav took the money, and what happened? He purchased the property using his own money for himself instead of for Rabba bar Chana. Ozol zavna lenafshay. How could he do that? It's ramois. Vatanya, we went to the Brisa, masha asa asoi ela shanag by minhag ramois. The answer is he had no choice. Ba'aga, a valley, it means an area da'alimi hava which belonged to strong men, difficult people. So l'Rav nahag be'kavod. So they had respect for Rav and they willingly sold him a field. But l'Rav bar Chana, who attempted to purchase the field, they didn't have the same degree of respect for him, and therefore they wouldn't sell him that land. So Rav didn't have a choice. He could not do it on behalf of Rabbi bar Chana. Well, once again, he should have come clean. He should have explained himself. He should have informed Rabbi bar Chana before approaching and proceeding with his own sales. Savar, he figured he might miss the chance. By the time that happens, another fellow will come and grab it and buy it. Therefore, he chapped the right. Next story, Rav Gidel. There was a story involving him. He was trying to purchase a certain property. Have a mahafech. Mahafech literally means turning over, but it means negotiating. He was trying to buy a certain field. And by the time he got to the point, Azal Rabbi Ava went along and purchased that same field that Rabbi Gidel was trying to buy. Also, Rav Gidel kavle. So Rav Gidel came to complain to Rabbi Zera. Look what happened. Look what Rabbi Abba did to me. Also, Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera was sort of not sure how to. So he went and he relayed the story, the complaint, the kavle to Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. Rav Yitzchak Nafcha responds to Rabbi Zera. Let's give it some time. Hamtein achiyala et kleinu l'regel. Let's not prejudice him. Let's see what he has to say. Let's wait until he comes up and joins us by the drashes, by the shurim, which they used to have by the Yamim Tovim. They used to come be makabel pnei Rav to greet the Rebbe. So he'll come amongst the multitude. We'll see him. We'll notice him. We'll approach him and ask him. Okay, that's what happened. Kisolak. So ultimately, Rabbi Abba arrives. Ashkechei and Rav Yitzchak Nafcha notices him. Amalei, he approaches him with a sort of a benign question. I have a question for you. Ani mahapech b'charora. Suppose a poor man is, making an effort to take possession of a ownerless, a hefker item, a charora, a cake or some baked goods. It's just a mashal. Basically, he's trying to get something for himself. Another fellow comes and snatches it away before the owner got a chance to take possession. What would you say? What's the halacha? How would you treat this fellow? Amalei says, what do you mean? This is totally not right. Nikra Rasha. Okay, once he says that, So Rav Yitzchak Nafcha turns back and he says, 1 second, I have a question. Velamar, my time avad hachi. You're right on. The fellow is a Russia. So why did you do a similar thing with Rav Giddel with the property? Why did you buy it out before you got a chance? The truth is, it's the first time I heard of it. I didn't know that Rav Giddel had an interest in buying that field. I'm sorry. Well, okay, so now that you know, please give it back to him. He says, now I'm stuck. I'd love to do it, but there's a problem. Look, I'm out of options. I'm not going to sell it to him. It's my first land, and it's not a good simon to sell off your first property. They bring from Rabbi Yashiv, only in the olden days, or something like a field which was yours for keeps for all time. But nowadays you buy an apartment, and then you move out into the bigger place, and then you grow out of that one. So initially the kavanah, the intention was to sort of upgrade and continue moving on. And selling the first and buying. So it's not called a lack of simon toiv, but when it's something which is meant to be yours permanently and you go and you sell it, so the first property that you own you shouldn't be selling. So I don't want to sell it. If he wants to take it as a gift, I'm willing to give it as a gift for free. That's how honest he was. So what happened? Rav Giddel Rav Giddel, the claimant here, he didn't take possession of the field. He didn't want to take it as a gift. I don't take gifts. One who dislikes gifts, his life is prolonged. Maral explains. A gift taker is dependent. His life is a life of dependence. Soine matanos asserts independence. He's connected to Hashem, the ultimate provider. He gets life, and in fact, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. It's midas chasidus. It's extra virtuous to conduct oneself in this manner, not to accept gifts. So that was out. He didn't want to take it as a gift. Rabbi Abba, who was the current owner, who actually purchased the field, he refused to use the field mishum da'hafech bar Rav Giddel, because he discovered that Rav Giddel really wanted it, and he didn't feel it was right for him to take possession of the field. So basically, it stayed stranded in limbo. Neither he entered the field nor he took possession. And what did he do? Miskarya Arya de Rabbanan. It was called the land of the Chachamim, of the Talmidim. Rashi says Hefker le Talmidim. It was put into the service of the Bnei Yeshiva. They used it, they enjoyed it, because none of these righteous Amoraim wanted to take it for themselves. Beautiful story. Says the Gemara, so we concluded phase 1 of the Mishnah. The fellow who was Noyeg Minag Ramos, who grabbed the Isha for himself instead of for the other fellow. Done deal, but it's Minag Ramos. Then we move on to phase 2 of the Mishnah. Reuben approaches Rachel. He's actually la'achar shaloshim yom. The Mishnah says it only takes effect after 30. If Shimon comes right in there and is Mekadesher effective immediately, it is effective immediately. What if loy ba'achar v'kitcher, says the Gemara? What if there's no Shimon in the works? Nobody came and took her within that 30-day period. Problem is, the money that you gave her on day 1, she already used. It's been consumed. It's not anymore available on day 30 when that KIDDUSHIN with Reuben is meant to be implemented. What if there's no competing husband? There's no Shimon. There's only Reuben. What happens now? Rab Ushmuel, they both say the Amr Tabayu Mukudeshes. She's Mukudesh to Reuben, rightfully so. Here's the Chiddush. Even if the money's gone, it's been spent. How does it work? There's no money at the point of implementation, which is day 30. Very simple. My time. Mahani Zuzi loy lemuvadam. These zuzim, the money that he gave her, wasn't meant as a loan. In which case, you would say it's like a person who's attempting to be mekadesh by forgiving a loan. It wasn't a loan; it was meant for KIDDUSHIN. Likewise, it's not just like a pikadon, like given to her for safekeeping. In which case, we learned back on Daf Mem Zayin. The only way it works is if there's some remnants of that pikadon at the point of implementation. No, that's not the case. I didn't give it to her as a pikadon. And the Gemara explains. It's not like a pikadon. Pikadon b'rshus the marakum is achli. If a pikadon goes missing, prior to implementation of a kiddushin. It's the prior owners, it's the the account holders' concern. It's his money that's lost, and therefore it only works. It can only be applied for kiddushin if there's some remnants of that money at the point of implementation. But here it's different. Sure, the money is spent, but who spent it? It's her expenditure. It was money given to her, for her keeps. So it's money that she spent, not his money. So therefore, she benefited. If she enjoyed the money, that's money for kiddushin. And likewise, it's not like a milva. You can't compare it to a milva, which cannot be applied for kiddushin, because milva loitza nitna. When you lend money, you don't expect that money to be available for you to take it. It's meant to be spent, right? So ultimately, when day 30 comes, you can't say, well, let's apply the credit, the loan. There's no money that he's not giving you anything now. It's just like sort of hypothetical, abstract value. There's no actual money that he's giving her, as opposed to this case, which was meant for kiddushin, strictly for kiddushin. Honey, but there is kiddushin. Yeah, why did I give her the $100 for kiddushin? So it could be applied even on day 30, even if the money's gone because she spent her own money, which was given to her for kiddushin. That's called getting value for your money. Furthermore, let's move on. Let's say he hands her kiddushin today. Implementation, closing date, 30 days from now. Nobody came along, no competing husband. Problem is, she changed her mind within that 30-day period. Can she do that or not? Mahu. We have a machlekes. Big machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Chayzeres, of course. She can have a change of heart. It wasn't really a full commitment. It was a verbal commitment. So, one verbal, expression can be negated by another verbal expression. I'll say dibur, umevatal dibur. Right? Her chazara can be mevatal, the initial commitment, because after all, it was merely verbal. The kiddushin itself did not take effect yet. So therefore, the dibur that she's saying now can undo that one. Rish Lakish Amar, no, she can't be chayzer. She can't change her mind. Lo yasi dibur mevatal dibur. The second dibur cannot undo the first dibur, and she's committed to the kiddushin, unless she actually accepts new kiddushin from somebody else. So that's a maasa, that's an act that can undo a dibur, but merely speech cannot undo previous speech. Okay, so bottom line, according to Rabbi Yehuda, one dibur can be mevatel the other. According to Rish Lakish, not. That's how we understand at this point. Okay, but soon we'll see that it's not a general concept regarding every dibur. It's only in this specific case. Let's see. Eisvei, Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who said you could be chayzer. Chayzer was a ches, like Rabbi Yehuda, right? Easy way to remember. So Rabbi Yehuda asks Rish Lakish. We have a halacha in Maseches Terumos. Reuben entrusted his shliach Shimon with the mission of separating truma from his crop. And then Reuben turns around and is mevatel that shlichus, cancels the mission. Bitel. If he did the bittel before Shimon actually got to do the truma, so the shlichus is batel, and he's no longer authorized to do the truma. Bottom line, we see in this case the dibur udiburhu, one dibur followed by another, v'ka'asi dibur and vatal dibur, and the second one can be vatal, the first one. That's a kasha on you, Rish Lakish, who says that the isha can no longer backtrack on the deal, on the original dibur. Well, says the Gemara, if it's just dibur, of course it could be undone by subsequent diburs. When Rish Lakish says she can't backtrack, that's specifically in this case of Kiddushin, where it's more than just, words. He actually gave her money. That's a maaseh katan. Although it's not, an actual implementation of the Kiddushin from which you can't backtrack, but it is sort of a maaseh, because, together with that dibur, there was a handing over of money, which accompanied the dibur. So it's more than just words. And that you can't undo with simply a dibur. Shani nesinas mois liad isha. Handing money to the isha is very similar. Very similar to a maaseh. It's not a full maaseh, it's not a full implementation of a process, but it is somewhat of a maaseh, more than just a dibur. And therefore, it's different than just by dibur, like by truma, right? Truma was a simple dibur. I asked you to do it, then I canceled it. But here it's more than that. And therefore, the second dibur of the isha cannot undo the maaseh. So before we continue, let's just itemize it. We have basically three possibilities of chazorah. If there was just dibur, of course all agree dibur 2 can cancel dibur 1. Let's go to the other extreme. If there was a true maaseh, I don't know, you makadosh the isha, you can't undo it with the dibur. Machlekes pertains to something in the middle, some sort of weak maaseh. Let's call it dibur / maaseh. Rabbi Yehuda says you can still be chayzer with dibur. Rish Lakish disagrees. Here comes another kasha. We're going to discover a halacha, a mishnah discussing this middle type of case, and you can do chazor. So he took a get and sent it to his wife with a shliach. And the husband happened to find the shliach on the road, or he sent another shliach to chase him. With the following message: Get the get I gave you to give to my wife, it's but I don't want you to deliver it. This dibur can now be mevatel, the assignment. Asks the Gemara on Rish Lakish. This is a perfect example of an in-between case. Handing of a get to a shliach with instructions is very similar to handing the money to the isha with the instructions for kiddush. Dummy, right? The Ketani and the Mishnah says it works. I raise a bottle, you can move vatal. Well, says the Gemara, this is not an in-between case. This is a very basic case of just plain dibur, which of course can be undone by a subsequent dibur. All agree. In that case, until the get actually gets to her, there was no even initiation of any process. It's merely just instructions. It's verbal. It's just dibur, which of course can be undone. Even Rish Lakish agrees. It's very different than kiddushin, who gave her the money. Dibur, we have the initial dibur, v'dibur, followed by the next dibur, and of course, also dibur, the second dibur can be mevatel, dibur can be mevatel the first one. Ace favorite Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yehuda. Now comes a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda who says dibur can be mevatel. Kol hakelim yardin l'idei to mustard machshava. So we know that when a utensil is fully produced, fully finished, fully brushed up and sanded and shined, it becomes nigmar malachtoi, and it's susceptible to tumah. It's makabel tumah. So as soon as he makes that decision, okay, I'm not touching this anymore. It's all touched up. It's good. It now descends yored. It sort of becomes susceptible for tumah. But to extract a kli from this status, to change its status, to have it lose that kabbalas tumah, that liability for tumah, that susceptibility, you have to do a masa, sort of like break it or change its form and undo that completion, right? So, which makes it no longer susceptible to tumah. And the formula is that masa moitzi miyad masa. A masa, an act, is strong enough that it can actually undo a previous act. Rashi says, for instance, let's say he's sanding down this item and he says, okay, done. And then he comes back and says, I want to do some more, and he starts working on it again. So that second masa can change its status and turns it into an incomplete item. So masa has that koyach. Motzi miyad masa can undo a previous masa, miyad machshava, from a previous decision. Masa strong enough that can undo that, as opposed to a machshava, merely thoughts do not have that power. Ein moitzia lo miyad masa. Machshava can't undo a previous masa or a previous machshava. So now, bishla miyad masa lemapka. Understand that a machshava is not strong enough to undo a masa. Right? Because delay asi dibur umevatel masa. Because a dibur or machshava doesn't have the power to undo, to override a previous masa. So once he finished, producing it, the masa sort of commits it. You can't just say, okay, I want to do some more and I want to render it a unfinished kli. You can't do that. Eli miyad machshava miyad topic. But I have a question, says Rish Lakish. Suppose I merely had a machshava. I had that sort of mental, commitment. I'm no longer going to deal with this kli, it's done. So there was no masa that expressed that decision. It was just a machshava or a dibur. So why can't the machshava today undo that? I have a change of heart. I still want to deal with it. I still want to fix it up and touch it up. Why can't that undo a machshava? According to Rabbi Yehuda, if two things are on equal footing, one dibur can be vat another dibur. Here as well. Says the Gemara, no, here's different. Shani machshava de tumah. When a person has a machshava that this item is now done, it's complete, it's nigmar malachtoi, that is not merely a machshava. It changes the status and designation of this vessel, of this kli, of this utensil. It's like it had a physical effect on it. We treat it as a masa. As we find in the pasuk, the Torah calls this like a masa. And of course it cannot be undone by merely machshava. Right? So all agree that a machshava or a dibur can't undo a masa, and that's the case here as well. Rav Papa, like we find by Rav Papa, the Rav Papa Rabbi. Rav Papa presented a contradiction, a seeming contradiction. The pasuk speaks about rendering produce roi l'kabel tuma, and that requires getting wet. It's called huksha l'kabel tuma, using one of the 7 primary liquids. Amongst them you have water, right? So if you have water coming into contact with an apple, that apple is now huksha l'kabel tuma. It's been rinsed, it's been completed, and ready for a tuma. Question: the pasuk says ki yiten. Ksiv ki yiten. He actually placed that water on the fruit. That's when it becomes susceptible to tumah. Huksha l'kabel tumah. Is that a requirement? Physically placing the water on the apple. Let's say it just rains on the apple, and I'm okay with it. I'm happy. Is that enough as well? Do you have to actually physically proceed and do that? So we have a stira within the actual word. Ksiv ki yitin, v'karinan ki yutan. In its spelling, we have yud, taf, nun, which can be read ki yitin. You must physically place it on the fruit. V'karinan ki yutan. But in terms of pronunciation, we read it as yutan. Water had been placed on that, had arrived onto that thing. So which way is it? Manual or automatic? Ha'ketzad. Ki yutan dumar ki d'chiyitin. Even if it happens on its own, it works. As long as it's similar in nature to ki yitin. What does that mean? Ma yitin de nichle, just like when you actually place the water, you're okay with it, you're happy about it. I've used the nichle. Likewise, if water happens to arrive on its own, and you're okay with it, you notice and you're happy about it, this stuff got rinsed, it's clean now, you're okay with it, then it has the same status. So bottom line, we find that the Torah considers this process of gemar malacha, of hechshel l'kabel tumah, which is also a form of gemar malacha because it's sort of the last and final phase of turning this fruit into a complete item, ready for consumption, etc. So that's called a change of status. It's called like a masa, like the item is now undergoing a transformation. It's a completed item. So even if it so happens that he didn't physically do anything, it was just a machshava, it was just consent, it was just agreeable to what's going on, that creates that change of status. It's considered like it has the same power like a ma'aseh, in that item, and therefore it cannot be undone simply with a machshava. So all agree that a masa cannot be done by machshava and a dibur. So it's not a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so in summary, if there was just a machshava or a dibur, all agree it can be undone with another dibur or another machshava. If it was a real masa, all agree it cannot be undone using these methods. If it was somewhere in the middle, like the case in KIDDUSHIN, here is a ring for KIDDUSHIN in 30 days. So that's sort of a weak masa. There was an act involved, but it wasn't really implemented now. Can there be a chazara? Rabbi Yehuda says yes. Rish Lakish says no. So that was one version of this machlekes. That gets more exciting. Rav Zvid Masni Lol Ha'ashmata. Rav Zvid had a different version of this machlekes between these two Amirayim, Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish. It pertains to the next Mishnah, over on DAF Ayin Tes. It was a similar case, but in the reverse. V'chein hi shenas non rishus l'shlucha. In our case, he asked the shliach to be mekadosh the isha for him. Sorry, in our case, he was mekadosh the isha, and then she had a change of mind, right? V'chein hi shenas non. In that case, it's like this: she empowered a shliach. V'chein hi shenas non rishus l'shlucha. She asked a fellow lekacha to go find Ruvain and accept KIDDUSHIN for her, right, to do it on her behalf. Now she went and found another husband and was mekadosh herself. So which one prevails? If she did hers first, KIDDUSHIN, that's the valid KIDDUSHIN, because she did hers before the shliach did his. What if the shliach did the KIDDUSHIN on her behalf before she got a chance to do her own? Ein KIDDUSHIN. So the shliach's KIDDUSHIN is chal and not hers. Here comes a question. What happens if she appointed a shliach? She didn't go and do her own KIDDUSHIN. What then? She changed her mind. She canceled the shlichus. What is the halacha? So here, unlike in the previous version of the Gemara, where the machlekes pertained only to that sort of case in the middle, where there was a masa that accompanied the dibur, according to this version of the Gemara, the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish, whether or not a chazara is effective, pertains to a simple case of dibur. She appointed a shliach, and now she's canceling it. Can't she do that? Mao. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Chayzeres, she could cancel that shlichus. Rish Lakish Amar Eina Chayzeres, she cannot do so. Why? Rabbi Yehuda Amar Chayzeres, she can cancel the shlichus, also dibur, mevatel dibur, because the second dibur can undo the first dibur. Rish Lakish Amar Eina Chayzeres, she can't undo it. Lo yaseh dibur, mevatel dibur, you can't undo one dibur with another. Eisvei. So now we're going to have several of those kashas that we had before, but it's going to be tailored to this version of the machlekes, which pertains to a plain, simple dibur, which she's trying to undo. Eisvei, Rabbi Yehuda, Rish Lakish. So we have a kasha on Rish Lakish who says you can't. From that Mishnah in Trumais, he asked the shliach to do truma, he cancels the deal, bitel, imat shaloi taram, if it preceded the truma, imat shaloi taram bitel, then the bitel works. And truma said truma, the shliach has no right to do truma. Clearly, dibur number 2 cancels dibur number 1. Rava says no. It wasn't just dibur number 2, there was more than that. The Baal Bayis did a masa, an action, to undo the dibur, and that of course works, because action speaks stronger than words. My skin was speaking. The Baal Bayis quickly went and did truma himself on his crop. The avale masa, it's an expression of masa. Of course, that undoes the dibur, which all agree. Esvei Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yehuda. Now comes a kasha. Back on Rabbi Yehuda, who says, Dibur number 2 can undo Dibur number 1. Kol HaKelim, right, that same Mishnah, we'll just go it quickly. Kol HaKelim Yardim Udei Temasan Machshava, Vein Oilim Temasan El Bashini Masa, Masa Moitzi Biad Masa, Vein Machshava Ein Motzia Lo Miad Masa, Vein Machshava. Okay, that was the story. Now, Bishlam Miad Masa Lemafka. I understand that a Machshava today cannot undo a previous Masa. Of course, the Dibur is not stronger than a Masa. Elo Miad Machshava Miad Topic. But today's Machshava, why can't it undo a previous Machshava? And this is a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. Amrleis, Rabbi Yehuda responds, same as before, Shani Machshava, the Tumah, Machshava that activates Kabbalah's Tumah is not just a Machshava, the Chimasa Domi. It has a very impactful effect on the item itself. It changes its status. It's a transformative decision. It's called a Masa, and therefore it cannot just be undone with a Machshava. Rav Papa, right? The whole story. Rav Papa Rami, Ksiv Kiyitain, Karina Kiyutan, Oketzat, Kiyutan Dimu Kiyitain, Mayitin Denichale, Afiutan Denichale. We find that the Torah describes this process as a Masa like Kiyitain. Esvei Rabbi Yehuda Rish Lakish. Now comes Rabbi Yehuda with the Kasha Rish Lakish, who said that you cannot undo Dibur number 1 with Dibur number 2. Hashliach get leishtu. So he sends a get to his wife with a shliach, and then he catches up to the shliach and he cancels the mission. Whether he did it directly or through his own shliach, who chased after him and nullified the shlichus. He tells him, right? So this is a straight kasha on Rish Lakish. We see that ultimately Dibur number 2 can undo Dibur number 1. Yufta Rish Lakish to Yufta. Vilchasad, Kamasid Rabbi Yehuda, we pass like Rabbi Yehuda, Filu Kamaisa. Even Rabbi Yehuda in the first version, who stretches it a bit further, because in that case, it wasn't just Dibur versus Dibur. In the first version, the machlekes pertain to a fellow who gave ma'is to a isha. So that's sort of like a pseudo ma'isa. Still we say asur dibur, matal dibur. She changes her heart. She has a dibur of chazara that can nullify, that can cancel the kiddushin. So that's how we paskin. Okay, so let's just summarize. We have two versions of this machlekes. In version number 1, the machlekes pertain to sort of a semi-maisa, whether that could be undone with a dibur. We pass like Rabbi Yehuda. In version number 2, the machlekes pertain to a simple case of dibur versus dibur, and once again we pass like Rabbi Yehuda. Now, kasha hilchasa. We seem to have some difficulty regarding the actual halacha lamas. You see, Amris hilchasa Rabbi Yehuda. You just told me we follow Rabbi Yehuda that dibur number 2 can undo dibur number 1, even though they're on equal plane. Dibur can undo a dibur. But then we know v'kaimelon hilchasok Rav Nachman. We follow Rav Nachman regarding what? Regarding that case of a fellow who sent a get and then caught up with the shliach and was mevatel. We follow Rav Nachman. What does Rav Nachman say in that case? We had a question on that halach. Okay, we know that the shlichus is batel. But what about the actual item, the get itself? I don't want you delivering it, but can we reuse that? Can we recycle the actual get? Basically, the question is, when I'm avatal the shlichus, what am I doing? How far am I going? Is it just a personal cancellation? I don't want you involved, but the get itself still stands, or I might be avatal the entire package, including the get. Rav Nachman Amar Chayzim Regarish, but you can reuse that same get next time. Rav Sheshas Amar, no, it's a complete cancellation. Einay Chayzim Regarish. And how do we paskin? V'kaimelon. We follow Rav Nachman. The get is still kosher. And here you tell me that we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that the bittul works. If the bittul works, then the get is batel. No, says the Gemara. Nihida bat lemeter shliach. True, I cancelled your shlichos appointment. I'm uninterested in you delivering the get today. I want to have still, some time to think about it. But the actual get, I'm not touching the get. Miteras get like batli. It wasn't a batel the get, and therefore it can be reused at a later date. Or at least on that day, otherwise you have a question of get mukdam. Okay, that's a sugi for Gittin. Okay, so that summarized this piece of the Gemara, which pertained to the second case of the Mishnah, which again involved a fellow being Mekadesh and Isha by giving her something today, and implementation scheduled after 30 days. Fine. Now we move on to the next case. a second person came and was Mekadesh the Isha in the interim. What's the halacha? Mekadesh is the Sheni. Right? Because Reuven's Kiddushin was not yet Chal, it didn't take effect until 30 days' time. So Shimon comes in, he's Mekadesh, he's got it. Amarav Mekudeshes l'Sheni Lo'ilam. She's Mekudesh to Shimon forever. Meaning, even when the 30 days are up, Reuven no longer has the ability to be Mekadesh because he lost his chance. Ushmuel Amar Mekudeshes l'Sheni. Of course, she's Mekudesh to Shimon, but only Ad Lamed Yom, until the 30 days arrive, because at that point it changes. Now Reuven steps back into the picture. Why? He lost his chance. La'achar Lamed Yom, Paki Kiddushin Sheni. Once 30 days are up, Shimon loses his Kiddushin, Vegamri Kiddushin Rishon, and Reuven's Kiddushin comes in and takes effect. How could that be? Yosef Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda was sitting, and he had the following kasha. I don't understand. Reuven had his opportunity. He missed his opportunity. He said the Kiddushin is only chal after 30 days. By the time 30 days arrives, Shimon was in there. Kiddushin Sheni my punky. Why would Shimon's Kiddushin expire? On account of what? On what merit does Reuven have the zechus to take this issue? Amalei Rav Yosef. So you're right. So Rav Yosef told Rav Chisda, you're right. Mar aresha masnila v'kasha lei. The reason why you had a kasha is because you thought that this discussion, this halacha of Shmuel, pertains to the first part of the Mishnah, to the case where it's actually it's the middle case of the Mishnah, where it's just the first of the last two cases, where Reuven was Mekadesher only to be implemented in 30 days. And there Shimon walked in, it was Mekadesher. So it doesn't. You're right. It can't. This discussion with Rav and Shmuel was not meant to apply to that case. So of course it was hard for you to understand. Man Resha Mashna Lavakashli had a kasha because if Shimon beat Reuven to the punch, he was Mekadesher within 30 days before Reuven's Kiddushin took effect. Of course, Shimon is the lucky guy. But that's the incorrect version. Rabbi Yehuda Sefer Masnala. I happen to know that Rabbi Yehuda had a different version. The Machlekes Rabbi Shmuel pertained to the next case, the last and final case of the Mishnah, which makes sense. There's nothing difficult to understand on that. What's the case? Reuven told her, "Ma'achshav or la'achar shleishim yom." A totally different case. Here's the ring. You're mekudesh to me. And then he adds cryptic words. Starting now, or la'achar shleishim yom. And what happened? Shimon moved right in there, and it was Mekadesher effective immediately. Mishnah says it's up in the air. It's total confusion. We don't know if Reuven's the husband, Shimon's the husband. It's a totally different case, because he said Me'achshav. Something's happening now, starting now. Okay, so that's the loch in the Mishnah. On that we have Rav and Shmuel that will come and elaborate further on the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says there's a suffix, how long does that suffix last? Does it only last until 30 days, or even past 30 days? It's an eternal, all-time, permanent confusion. Ushmuel Amar Mukudeshes, Ben Mukudeshes, Ella Ad Lamed Yom. This whole confusion only applies until day 30. But once day 30 arrives, Reuven is the lucky fellow. La'ach Lamed, once 30 days are up, Paki Kiddushin. Shimon leaves the scene. The Gamri Kiddushin Rishon, Reuven's Kiddushin is now concluded, and implemented. What's going on? So as the Gemara, there are two ways to look at this, two ways to define this expression, this term. Ma'achshav ula'achar shleishim yom. Well, what do you mean? What do you have in mind? Was he changing his mind? First he says, starting now. No, I want you after 30 days. In which case, Shimon walks in on day 20, he's got her. Reuven's not yet on the scene. He changed his mind. He's waiting. He's taking his time. Or you can say, it It was just a Tanai. I want the Kiddushin starting today, but give me some time to to confirm it in my mind. If I don't change my mind within 30 days, I want it to happen starting now. Right? So in which case, if come 30 days he's okay with it, the Kiddushin was Chal Lemafreya. It's activated retroactively, and Shimon is not a player anymore, because Ruvain preceded Shimon. So that's the point of the Machlekes. Okay, let's see it inside. Rav Mesapkele Itna Havoy Chazor Havoy. Rav wasn't sure. Is he changing the terms and only wants it after 30, or is it just a Tanai? Ultimately, on day 30, if he's okay with it, I want it applied from day 1. And therefore, Rav says, this confusion, this Mekudesh's status is perpetual. We'll never know what he had in mind. We'll never know who she's married to. She needs to get from both. But Lishmuel, no. It's more simple than that. Pshitolei, it was clear to him that Tanah Havoy, this type of expression, Ma'achshav al Shleishim, is just a Tanai. I want it starting now, but give me some time to think about it. But once day 30 comes, it's confirmed retroactively. So when the Mishnah says there's confusion, that's only until day 30. Until then, we don't know. Maybe, Reuven will pass away and the condition will not take effect. So she's somewhere in the middle between Reuven and Shimon. But once Lamed Yom arrives and Reuven is okay with the condition retroactively, she was his all along and Shimon is out of the picture. So it's a limited time confusion until Lamed Yom. But once that happens, she is fully Reuven's wife. And this discussion between Rav and Shmuel is actually also Machlekes Tanaim. In Maseches Gittin, we have a similar type of situation. The Sanya, Me'ayom Lachar Misa. He issues a get, and he says, look, Me'ayom, starting today, Ulachar Misa, and after I pass away. Well, what is he saying? Is he changing his mind? Is it just a condition? Get, if ain't a get. Dibur Chachamim. According to the Chachamim, we're not sure how to deal with it. So he gave her the get today with this lashon, and he passed away, a month later. Chacham say, we're not sure. Is it a get or not? Because you can't give a get after. A person can't give a get after he passes away, right? So what did he mean? Was he being chayzer? Was he changing his mind? First he says today, and then he said, no, after I die. So then it only happens after he dies, and it's not really a get. That's one way. Or should we say it's just a tanai? If I die, I want it to happen from today, so it works. So we're not sure. That's the Chacham's approach. That's like Rav, right? That's like Rav. We're not sure if these things denote Chazara or it's just an expression of a Tanai. Rabbi Eimer, because I get. Rabbi says it works, because it's just a Tanai. If he dies, it happens from today. So basically, Rav and Shmuel are aligned with the Chacham and Rabbi. So why does Rav and Shmuel, why do they have to have their own separate discussion in Maseches Kiddushin? Let them just say simply, look, I hold like, Chacham, I hold like Rabbi. Tzricha, there's a point being brought out by repeating the discussion in Maseches Kiddushin. There's something being highlighted here. Had Rav simply have said, look, I adopted Rabban and Shita, we're not sure Safek, we're not sure Chazara. I would say, it makes more sense by a get where they're separating, and maybe he's, it's something that he's not jumping into. He'd like to procrastinate, and there's good reason to believe that he's doing it with difficulty, and maybe he's really doing a chazara. He doesn't want it to happen from now. He wants it to happen later on. So there is a good reason to believe that he changed the terms. He started with a reference to immediate implementation, but then he changed his mind. As opposed to Maseches Kiddushin, where she's coming near, meaning he's marrying her with excitement. So maybe even Rav would agree to Shmuel that by Kiddushin it's a totally different equation, and of course he wants her starting now. He's just giving himself a little, wiggle space, a little leeway to think about it. But once that time period is up, the Kiddushin is Chal starting from day 1. So that's why Rav had to point out his sheet even by Kiddushin. We're not sure what he meant. Now at Shmuel likewise, just simply paskin like Rebbe, that by the Mayam Lachamisa, by the get, it's just a Tanai. Havamina would say Hasamu didn't get Lachamisa. Over there we assume it's just a Tanai because everybody knows you can't issue a get after Misa. So he didn't mean that it should only happen later. He meant it happens now on condition that I die. Avalach, when it comes to Kiddushin, 30 days is still reasonable. The Yesh Kiddushin Achal Lamed, you can make a Kiddushin that only takes effect after 30 days. So maybe he meant it as such. He meant to change his mind. I'm going to wait until 30 days and have it happen then. So perhaps over here he would agree to Rav that we're not sure. There's still that chance that he meant that it's only going to be Chal Achal Lamed. That's why we have a separate discussion between Rav and Shmuel by Kiddushin to highlight their differences of opinion regarding whether we treat it as a Tanai or whether as a suffix, which sort of lines up with the Shitas of Rabbi Chachamim in Maseches Gittin. Okay, so in summary, we have a Mishnah with 3 parts. Part 1. I asked him to do a Kiddushin for me, and he took the Isha for himself. Too bad, but it's a Minhag Ramos, which is in contrast to the Erlichkeit exhibited by the Amoraim in the stories later on. We have next case in the Mishnah where he approached an Isha with Kiddushin, which will only be Chal after 30 days. In that case we say it's just pending. And of course if Shimon moves in, he can Mekadosh the Isha. What if she changes her mind, she makes a Chazorah? We have a Machlekes in Rabbi Yehuda and Rish Lakish. And then we move on to the next case, where he was Mekadosher today, Ma'achshav V'Lachash Leishim Yoim, and the second fellow comes in as Mekadosher in the interim. This generates confusion. Mekudeshes and Mekudeshes. According to Rav, because we're not sure what the first fellow meant. Did he mean Tanai? Did he mean Chazorah? So the confusion is perpetual, La'olam. Whereas according to Shmuel, he certainly meant a Tanai. So this suffix, this Kiddushin and Kiddushin only happens until 30 days, because we're unsure as to how things will unfold, but once 30 days are up and this fellow is alive and well and wants the Kiddushin, she's his, without any concerns. Hatzlach Rabbi to B'suras Toivus and all the best.